Okay, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm presenting to you from the northwest of the UK, and today I've spent the day wandering around a Roman city called Chester. And you sort of look at these buildings, and some of the buildings were dated from 1224, and you sort of wonder about project management years and years and years ago, and it's kind of intriguing how the discipline has developed over time. So, welcome to this session to explore what we mean by Agile PMO. As you know, the Lean-Agile PMO appears in Chapter 6 of Bill's book, The PMO Lifecycle: Building and Running and Shutting Down. I was delighted to be able to contribute this chapter for Bill. However, Lean is about continuous improvement. So this presentation represents a further step beyond some of the materials in Bill's book. I'm Jon Ward, and I run a team of project managers in the UK, Beneficial Consulting. I've got over 30 years experience of managing IT and business change projects. My accent, should you wonder, is from the west of England, Gloucestershire. Most recently, I've been involved on working with Agile, coaching senior execs and project teams. I'm a certified Scrum Master. In one of our recent activities, we found that Agile project teams were being adversely affected by the PMO and by the what I'll call the project, the organizational project ecosystem. Because what were they doing was they were saying, well, oh, we want to do the scrums and we want to do the retrospectives, but the PMO was saying, no, we want you to do the stage gates, we want you to do all the other pieces that would be in a traditional PMO model, and that was slowing down the project delivery. So the Lean Agile PMO was born a result of our analysis and our design and our redesign activities of the PMO. So what do we mean by a PMO? I think there's almost as many PMOs, definitions of a PMO, as there are PMOs. It's all things to all people. So I want to try and distinguish between the people who actually deliver the projects and programs, the BAs, the program managers, the people who do the sprints and the releases. And for the purpose of today's presentation, what I want to do is to define the PMO as the operational or organizational layer which sits between the projects and the sponsoring organizations. So I'm not thinking about the project teams, I'm thinking about this umbrella organization that sits over the top. So why do we need this? Why do we need some? Well, according to the PMI, and that's the pulse of the profession report back in February this year, 71% of organizations have a PMO. The same number, which is I guess a coincidence, 71% of organizations are using agile delivery, excuse me, agile delivery approaches to a greater or lesser extent. This means that the typical PMO is therefore having to support both agile and traditional projects. Hence what I've called, or what we've called, the Lean Agile PMO. So what does it mean? Why lean? Well, lean is about creating value in the shortest possible time. How often have we heard, as PMO practitioners, have we heard the question or even asked ourselves, what's the value of the PMO? Can you explain the value of the PMO? Why are we doing this? Well, lean is about eradicating waste. In PMO terms, this means doing only the things that matter, providing the highest quality service with the lowest level of resource, with the lowest level of effort available. Lastly, lean is about feedback loops and continuous improvement, running a PMO to maximize stakeholder satisfaction. So we're talking about creating value, we're about reducing waste, We're about establishing pull. That means that people want our services. And we're about continuously improving. Lastly, Lean is not about designing the people, the process, and the tools of the PMO and hoping people like them. Lean is about finding out what the organization wants and delivering it. The Lean objectives, therefore, of the PMO is to design a PMO which delivers the maximum values to its customers, i.e., what the customer needs, with as little wasted effort as possible. To facilitate the execution such that wasted effort in the project team is minimized, and to provide an ethos and mechanism for continuous improvement, both for the project teams and for the PMO itself. Why do we talk about Agile? Well, obviously, we're having to manage Agile projects, but that wasn't enough. We're designing a PMO that delivers support to both Agile and traditional projects. Agile is focused on continuous delivery, and it talks about the most effective and efficient means of communication is face-to-face rather than documentation. How often have we heard the PMO criticized as being a bureaucracy? Just enough documentation, produced just in time, flies in the face of the perceived wisdom of many project organizations. Agile presents the concept of the servant leader, which facilitates the team. In many ways, Agile, when operating properly, represents more disciplined approach than many of our traditional models. So Agile is not throwing away the things that we value and the things that we really have seen create the value for our organization. Agile is about adjusting that and delivering the same thing in a slightly different way. So what we're doing is we're providing a project ecosystem and a collaborative culture such that projects are demonstrably delivered as fast as possible. That's irrespective of the delivery methodology, with just enough governance, with just enough documentation, so that oversight, so that the risks are well managed and the success is assured. You see, risk management, in my mind, is about reducing the risk levels on a project increases the probability of success. So the Lean Agile PMO is looking about improving the success of projects and having some skin in the game. Lean. To design the PMO, let's summarize, I meant to say. Lean, to design a PMO which delivers the maximum value to customers, stakeholders, with as little wasted effort as possible. To facilitate project execution so that wasted project and PMO effort is minimized. To provide an ecosystem such that projects are demonstrably delivered as fast as possible, irrespective of delivery methodology, with just enough documentation and governance so that oversight, so that risks are well managed and success is assured. It's delivery agnostic. It's whether you're talking about waterfall or agile, it stops projects from going wrong. There's a lot in that sentence. How do we stop projects going wrong? What do we look at? What is the change in remit to be able to do that? It assists projects to go faster. How does it do that? How does it increase the pace? How does it provide the drumbeat if you're talking about agile projects? It emphasizes the business case. Why? Because Agile is talking about delivery of business value. And if you look at prioritizing the portfolio or prioritizing the sprint, we're talking about value delivered early. And that's all about emphasizing the business case. That means we've got to have much better, much stronger, much more sensible business cases than perhaps some of the expense justifications we've seen in the past. It buffers the agile projects that are learning and continuously improving from less agile elements of the organization. So things like getting the finances right, things like providing the forecasts, things like funding and getting the data to the organization, to the organization, parts of the organization which need it. It proactively manages the portfolio. It funds during funding, initiation, stopping projects. Agile portfolio management, don't forget, is about stopping projects which no longer make sense. It's about stopping projects and recording those benefits which have been realized. It provides assurance to the stakeholders that projects are being well managed. Project assurance, red, amber, green analysis, status. What does that mean in the Agile terms? Deep dives. How do you do the deep dive with an Agile project? And how do you know what you're seeing actually reflects the true status of the project? We're talking about positive assurance. That is, will the project deliver the intended outcomes? We're not talking about has the document been filled out. We're talking about much more hands-on. And I think you'll see there from these 6 items, we're talking about a different kind of animal. It's much more about being proactive, driving value, assisting projects in such a way that the organization can illustratively see the value of the PMO. Why do we need to change? Well, traditional PMO, surprisingly enough, we've seen it as a function that acts as a brake. It forces comprehensive documents instead of applying the principle of just enough and just in time. It reduces performance by having time-consuming processes. It forces rules, which are counter the self-managed team approach, but but enforces the rules which really count. So it's about actions which are facilitating more rapid change. So throughout the time of looking at the Lean-Agile PMO, we're asking ourselves the question, how does this meeting process artifact make the project go faster or deliver more securely or reduce the risk? So we're changing the emphasis of the project PMO. Potential challenges for the PMO. Projects are self-managing. We're no longer the project police. Instead, we're the facilitators of change. We're developing, the project teams are developing the ways of working as they go. So that means that they're not going to get from 0 to 60 in the first few days of the project. They develop their ways. We have some teams which are perpetual teams with Agile. They will already establish roles and responsibilities, and we will need to work with these guys. In some regards, again, I'll say the Agile practices are more disciplined than waterfall. Why do I say this? Well, things like the retrospective, the sprint review, those things add tremendous value and controls to the Agile program that we don't see the similar side in the waterfall program. Yes, we get meetings and monthly meetings and steer codes and so on. Yes, we get that. But Agile has got an inbuilt controlling mechanism within the project team itself. And I think this is much more strong for the PMO to recognize. And it means the PMO has to think about how they're dealing with the Agile project teams. You've got 2 types of Agile. You've got perpetual teams and you've got transient teams. Perpetual teams are typically product orientated. They manage their own backlog. They develop on processes over time. They're managing their own backlog. Transient teams, however, only last as long as it takes. So, for example, if you're doing a Dodd-Frank project, and once the organization is compliant, then the team is disbanded. The PMO has a role in these teams, helping them to up their game and to perform. So they have a role of providing lessons learned, providing information to these projects, and giving them, enabling them, facilitating them to actually move forward. Both teams may favor different agile approaches. They may use different metrics. They may use different techniques. The PMO has a role in harmonizing and providing the data consistently from the project teams required to the organization. But agile does not equal anarchy. Therefore, the PMO needs to provide agile frameworks, coaching and guidance, be proactive and resourceful, support the delivery process. I've picked out two areas that I really think support can be provided. One is estimation. How long did this project take? If we did something similar in the past, how long did this project take? If it took 2 years, why is this one going to take 1.5 years or 3 years? If we're looking at risks, what issues did we encounter on previous endeavors? What are the typical things we find? And we're not talking about what's in previous risk logs. We're talking about what issues did organizations hit? And lastly, the PMO needs to provide information and assurance to the stakeholders that their investment is being wisely spent. Excuse me. The Lean-Agile PMO is specifically designed to support these activities, the agile and the traditional activities. So how to support? Here's the list. It's delivery method agnostic, enabling projects to deliver faster. Capers-Jones identified that projects take a long time to hit performance and time is wasted during initiation. So therefore, if we can help organizations initiate faster, get up and running quicker, understand the vision more completely, then less time is wasted during the initiation. I spent analyzing one of the project teams, one of the project groups in New York for an international bank, and we found that 16% of the project budget had been spent before the project actually was initiated, before approval was given, was defined. Stopping that, making sure that project teams do not mobilize before the organization is ready, actually helps the projects to deliver faster. Stopping projects from going wrong. Independent RAG status. In my view, there's a new iron triangle. Because of the emphasis on benefits in Agile, the iron triangle, instead of cost, schedule, and budget, becomes benefits, schedule, and budget. Because quality, schedule, and budget become benefits, schedule, and budget. Effective management of the portfolio. What happens in Agile is that there's much more tranche funding. They split it more into, are we got enough for the next release, the next sprints, and so on. Well, this you can actually apply over onto the waterfall projects too, and you can give them tranche funding for the first stage and then second stage. I'm seeing in international banks, at least, they're doing 3 sets of funding. The first funding is around the actual shall we, shan't we concept stage. The next is tranche funding is around the feasibility and the scoping of the design, the scoping of the solution, and then the last set of funding is around the delivery. This allows the portfolio managers to say, do we still want to spend this money? Instead of allocating all of the money for 2018 on January the 1st, they would actually spread out the money and allow that to be more applied to more to the projects with the greatest need. So what happens in the current organizations is if they do allocate all their money for 2018, they haven't got room to maneuver. Using agile project management and agile portfolio management, you see projects being stopped a lot earlier and more regularly than you do in a traditional environment. It places greater emphasis on the business case, of course. Release and sprint plans prioritize functions which deliver the highest value in the earlier stage in the project. This means that value has to be defined properly up front and has to be clearly and illustratively made to the organization. The Agile PMO buffers the teams. How does this add value? Yet the organization may need it. So we might find, for example, budgetary forecasts, next year planning, all that type of things. The conscious effort of the PMO to provide the things which the organization needs, but not putting the burden on the project teams, to allow them to be doing their sprints and their releases in as fast a time as possible. Lastly, reassurance. Meaning full status reports, yes. Full status reports, does that mean the project team has to deliver everything? No. What can we know? So, for example, if the organization in a status report needs budget, and we know that the project team hasn't requested any additional budget, we can use, because they're using Agile, we can actually say, okay, well, we know what the budget will be for next year, next month. Sorry, not next year, next month, and so on. Last thing we can do, for as far as the stakeholders are concerned, is to monitor the path to green plans. If you've come up with a project that is not in green status, then naturally you would prepare the path to green plan. And that would be a function of the PMO to monitor that path to green plan. And if the path to green plan is slipping, then obviously you need to do a dig into that to find out why and help the project team recover. So how do we deliver faster? It's specifically designed for the speed of delivery. I want to talk about a little more about some of these perspectives with a little bit more detail. Risk checklists, for example, for transition teams. We could help them by providing a checklist of all the issues that have been encountered by similar projects in the preceding year, 2 years, and so on. Estimation support. We know that when we're talking about Agile, that they won't be using the same metrics and team for team, and there is a resistance to measure from team to team. But to be able to give them some metrics from previous projects will help them benchmark themselves and help them understand how they're performing and so on. I think there's some areas where the PMO adds value. For example, there's quite a lot of Agile project teams in their stand-ups, they don't consider the project metrics. I think the PMO can help them by actually questioning the metrics that are being produced and questioning how their velocity, what was their velocity, what was their cadence, what was their lead time, and so on. So the PMO can provide estimation tools and a challenge in there and enable the team to perform by providing coaching and so on. Stopping projects from go wrong. I love the hand up on the right-hand side there. What does it mean? It means, in essence, getting involved. Agile is about collaboration. It's about working together in teams. Far too often we've seen PMOs and project teams being confrontational. So it's about getting the team on side. It's about being there as a supporting leader, establishing the culture. Hello, I'm from the PMO and I'm here to help. You know, we haven't heard those words, and sometimes people have put jokes around that. Meaningful status evaluations. Meaningful status evaluations by the PMO. Excuse me. This means that the project PMO has to know the projects. A project may be forecasting an overspend. But if it delivers significantly more benefits, does that mean the project's red? We're starting to challenge some of the basic underlying assumptions that PMOs have applied to projects in the past. Very interesting. One of my clients has got a very interesting situation going on at the moment. They've implemented something where they've realized they need to think about the design. The bank has realized that they by band-aiding project solutions in the past, they're actually costing themselves more in operational cost because they've cut corners on the project budgets. So now if they say, okay, we need a customer management system, and the project team says, well, that's going to cost you £2 million and it will deliver XYZ benefits, let's say £10 million. So what they're saying now is, okay, if I give you 3 million, what additional benefits can you get? Instead of the previous conversation, which was, you said 2 million, I really only want to spend 1.5. So in this way, what the organization is trying to do over the long term is actually to address some of its cost of ownership and some of the cost of systems that are going forward in the medium term. Meaningful status evaluations. That's what we need to do. And that means understanding what the objectives are of the project, what particular outcomes we're seeking. So other projects, for example, cost reduction, if they're not going to reduce the cost, then the project would go red. It doesn't mean the project might be in a red status. It might still be delivering and spending the right money. But if it's not going to achieve the project savings the operational savings that it said it was going to do, then why would you put it anything other than red? Agile relies on its success for engagement with the business. If engagement is not forthcoming or has been withdrawn, this could also indicate a red or amber status. So path to green plans are very important. So you've got an organization where they're trying to run a project with the business not engaging. How many times have we seen that? The business not engaging. And you would say, why is this project red? Oh, it's because your guys aren't participating in the Agile project. But there's also some stupid stuff coming out of Agile saying, oh, we're expecting the sponsor, if you're talking about a bank, an MD of a division being at a daily stand-up, get real. We've got to have delegated authority to product owners and so on. And we've got to make sure that the products are being developed and defined in the right way. Of course, that's part of the role of the PMO, yeah? So if that's not happening, then we could flag that and say, hang on, this isn't right. We need to decide that. The other thing we need to do is provide data, tools, and techniques to facilitate the project. So I'm just working at the moment with a client, again, a bank, and they're trying to introduce that. They haven't decided on any automated testing tools. So we're saying, why aren't you taking advantage of DevOps and all the testing tool developments that have happened over the last 5-10 years or so? Agile portfolio management will not be within the scope of every PMO. So just as we've got the levels of PMO that we would expect in a traditional framework, so we've got the same within the Lean Agile piece. For portfolio prioritization, read backlog, release, sprint prioritization. The actual type of work that we're just about to do now, we're doing for 2018, we're starting to kick off big room planning. Who's going to facilitate that? That would be a PMO function to facilitate that, because in the room, you've got, 10, 12 teams, all trying to work out what they're going to do next, beginning half of next year, and what are their dependencies on other teams and so on. What's the funding impacts of the decisions which are being made? So the prioritization on value, size, and risk is commonplace. That means that the project teams have to understand value, size, and risk. That means the PMO also has to understand what is value, size, and risk, and what's the impact of that on the portfolio. There is, within Agile, the understanding that the essence of change management is reduced. That's absolutely correct. We can do minor changes in terms of the depth of the project. I heard a really good analogy. If you're talking about the depth of the project, then it's really up to the project team, and we don't need to do change control. We've got that covered within the Agile process. But if a project is starting to change the width of the project, i.e. to take on more scope, then you might already have another project running in that space somewhere else in the organization. So therefore, when you're talking about increasing the width of the project, then you will need to go back to portfolio monitoring and change control, just as you would do in the traditional environment. In many organizations, what we do at the beginning of the project, if you look at traditional waterfall processes, in the UK, we emphasize Prince 2, but we also use PMI type practices. Because we've had a focus on what are we trying to achieve, what we do is we go through a point of saying, what is the scope of the project, high level requirements, detailed requirements, functional specifications, detailed designs, and so on. So over the course of time, and as money is spent, what we see is that the detail of the project in terms of what the requirement is increased. It becomes more sound. It becomes more detailed. What we're doing with the business case is saying, because the outline of and we're looking at value, is the business case should be developed in exactly the same way as the requirements. Every time you take the requirements to the next level, so you can take the business case to the next level. Let me give you an example. Excuse me. If the business case for a project is that you're going to make £20 million savings or dollars savings, then you put it, and the next iteration of the functional spec or the project, we now know a bit more about the scope. You might say to the benefits, okay, this is a multinational project, so multinational company, so Spain, instead of having just one number of 20 million, you might say Spain is going to deliver 2 million. The US is going to deliver 8 million. The UK is going to deliver 4 million, and so on. Then when you get to the next stage of the requirements, you might say, oh, that 1 million for Spain, well, actually, that's based on let's say it's a credit card company, a card population of 5.8 million. The volume in the UK is based on 28 million. The balance in the UK, 65 million. So we're getting much more detail about what the business benefit is and how it and what it depends. Then you can say, okay, if the volume of cards falls in Spain or increases in Spain, what does that do to my 1 million saving? So what we're doing is we're trying to get much more closely aligned between the project forecasted outputs and the project the original intent. This means that the PMO need to monitor that business case during every iteration. And when when they're doing improvements and so on, they would actually say, okay, this project, and when they go through stage gates, this project now is based on a volume of XY, 1 million in Spain, and it's based on 2 point something million card transactions. That then will be in the business case. And when we come to actually start to monitor the realization of benefits, we can actually say, yes, we've got 2.8 million card transactions. Therefore, we should still see the 1 million from Spain. What happens is there's something in Agile called pipeline cleansing or backlog cleansing. This is about the organization deciding where it spends the money, and so that it continually spends the money on its most significant initiatives. And the Agile monitors that case and makes sure that they do that, and it recommends which portfolios and which projects should be funded. I love the picture of the buffer. the biggest problem we've had with Agile, believe it or not, has been with finance. The finance people understanding why, what we're doing, what the portfolio management process is. So let me play you a little scenario that happened to me about last year. In fact, about this time last year, the organization said, what are you going to spend on projects next year? And they come up with a number and they said, okay, this particular organization, £30 million. It's quite a big portfolio. And then the finance people said, which projects are you going to spend this on? And they wanted a list of projects before they got to January the 1st, before they could authorize the budget spend. What is a much better way is for the finance team to say, how much money can you file? And they say, okay, portfolio management process, you've got 30 million or 25 million to spend, and we will trust you to actually define which projects to spend it on and to maximize the business benefit from it. But they really resisted the fact that we do that to them. Legal, similar problems around trying to implement agile projects where they want contracts, fixed price contracts with external suppliers. And if you're going to do a fixed price project, then you obviously got to do big requirements up front, which actually flies in the face of the agile processes. HR want to know who's doing what on the project. So they wanted to know what the agile job families were, and they wanted to know about staff appraisals. Well, when you come to appraisals, do you actually appraise a project team, or are you actually appraising an individual when you're talking about doing agile and it's a self-managed teams? So the PM absorbed that and provides like it pulls and stretches to allow the organization to have the data, the information required in a consistent manner while the lean team is working, or the agile team is working in the way they particularly want. I'm astonished in some PMOs, and I think this is probably encouraged by the tool vendors. What they do is the project management team, the project management software rather, actually produces a status report, and then we provide exactly the same status report through to the stakeholders. Of course, the project team needs to provide its status report to its stakeholders and its steering committee. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the portfolio level and looking at a group of projects. What we need to do is the Lean Agile PMO needs to decide which projects it needs the stakeholders to look at. Establish an independent view of project health and say, you know, these 20 or 30 projects are running in green status. You don't need to look at those. These projects are in amber status. These projects are in red status. These are the ones you need to look at. You don't need to look at all 50 in the portfolio. We just need to look at these 10, 12 that are in red and amber status. But that means to establish an independent view of the project health. And that means that the PMO has got to engage and be collaborative with the project teams. Does mean still, yes, there's no reason why you can't do project reviews and deep dives. Just because you've got an agile team, of course you can do that. But it does mean the data that you're capturing will be far more dynamic. There will be much more face-to-face conversation, and there will be review of documents, and there'll be much more taking information off radiators from team meetings and so on. There's a big no here, and the big no is the PMO never participates in the team retrospective. The team is the team. The PMO, if it's going to put any input into the project, does it during the sprint review or the release review. The retrospective is the time for the team to work together, to be open and honest with each other about what they can improve, what they've achieved, and so on. It's not a place for outsiders to be. Otherwise, you'll destroy the team dynamics. So what we're doing back to the PMO is some bespoke process design. We're enabling faster delivery. Sorry, we're doing portfolio management, bottom left-hand corner, right-hand corner, portfolio management. We're looking at the pipeline control, business case prioritization, and so on. We're enabling faster delivery. We're doing assurance and reporting, and we're stopping projects going wrong. And what we need to do is to look at the processes that we need to have in the PMO in order to fulfill the stakeholders' objectives and requirements. And that's basically what we're going to do. We're going to produce a set of processes which enable us to do that. 3 different types of PMO: business or program level, enterprise level. And the enterprise level probably would have most of the portfolio functions and so on. So how does it add value? Looking at the overall benefits, we're looking with what we've seen is projects running with lower risk profiles. How do you really? How we did it? We looked at their risk profile in terms of a risk burn down chart, and what we did was we actually measured across a portfolio projects with lower risk profiles. Fewer projects running in red and amber status. Clear, measurable benefit of Agile PMO that we had designed. We found that we would reduce the red and amber projects from around the 40% mark to less than 15%. The other thing we obviously could measure was how the stakeholders were feeling about the PMO. Challenges. I think the PMO needs to think about how the organization does the investment reviews on the project portfolio, and actually has to align its information that it provides with the type of processes that you see the organization doing. So if the organization is doing tranche funding, it needs to be for both agile and traditional projects. It needs to look at all of the whole approach. Obviously, if you've got projects, then there will be tranche funding there. You wouldn't be looking at that at the portfolio level other than the annual planning piece. It needs to work on the just enough principles. We're providing the right data to fit the stakeholders' needs. What do we see in terms of being greater clarity about the business goals? What we saw was we did this exercise, we benchmarked the benefits realized from last year's projects. What we did, we looked at all the business cases or the business case for a number of the projects that have been delivered last year, and we then set about measuring what were the benefits that we could identify. We got 38%. We found that some of that was due to that number was so low was because of lack of the management information. But when we actually started to do better business cases, and when people realized we were actually, as a PMO, going to measure those goals and the benefits, we found that benefits realized rose from around the 38% mark to actually more than 75%. The other governance we saw was escalation of systemic or critical issues. The PMO identifying there's a systemic trend here. Hang on, look, we've got resources missing here, we've got resources missing there. We've got a resource problem, guys. So once we actually be able to put that to senior management, we actually allow the portfolio governance to go forward. Other thing we saw was, I don't know whether you've seen it yourselves, but red, amber, green status is an abused science. Excuse me, in my view. What we're seeing is red, amber, green across the portfolio. We can actually come up with a much more simple approach to red, amber, green. What people sometimes say, okay, what do we do with path to green activities? They appear as spikes in the Agile backlogs. And what we can actually see by what we do is fewer projects running in amber and green status. There are some implications for project teams. We, as a PMO, we are actually forcing them to forecast. We are actually forcing them to produce path to green plans, which actually means they've got to face up to the fact that they have a project which is not in green status. We need to, the impact on waterfall teams is that they need to emphasize benefits delivered. How many times have we seen an IT team say, oh, we throw it over the wall for the business to deliver, the business to deal with? What this means is if we're starting to measure benefits delivered, then we need to focus on the benefits realization activities as much or with the same emphasis as the requirements definition activities. There's great tools, I don't know whether you've come across it, in managing successful programs, part of the UK government's PRINCE documentation. It's called a benefits map, and it's in managing successful programs. And it really is great because you can use requirements traceability, tracing that back to the benefits. So if you have a requirement that doesn't trace back to a benefit, doesn't link to a benefit, excuse me, you'd be asking yourselves, why on earth are you doing that? Could be because of some good security reason or other reason, but at least it allows you to ask the question. RAID logs. What we see is people ask about how do we know that Agile projects are dealing with risk properly. We should be seeing mitigation actions, exactly the same PRAM principles, but what we should see is risk. PRAM, by the way, that's the same as the PMI principles. You should see the mitigating actions as spikes in the sprint backlog. The sponsors should sign off on the risk profile, and that's in line with their risk appetite. And the key mechanism is the risk burn down chart, where you're looking at the impact. Impact times probability equals the weighting factor. Resolution date gives you when that risk has gone away. That gives you a burn down over time, and then you can plot and manage actual risk profile compared to planned. Other observations we've got. We're really struggling at the moment with CapEx and OpEx, making sure that those two are aligned and for Agile projects. Gate process is moving towards a checkpoint rather than away from an emphasis on documentation. It's an emphasis on delivery. Interesting thing is change readiness key for the PMO with delivering change and projects faster and more frequently. What you can find is that if you don't control the Agile delivery by looking at the target. So let me give you an example. We had a project that was going to be delivering a new general ledger in Singapore. What we knew when we did the change readiness was that the 3 key leaders in Singapore have been hired by another bank, and they'd left as a team. We were already flying in people from London and New York to provide cover for the accounting team and closing the books on a monthly basis. And we then wanted to change the general ledger. Even though the project team was ready, the business wasn't ready. So therefore we stopped the project. Change readiness is fundamental. What we're doing now with rapid change, we could have 3 or 4 different projects all hitting the same department. You'll need one of those projects to leave some debris behind, and your next project, the project that's coming along in the second stage, may not be able to deploy. We need to engage greater with the HR processes. The one that really is worrying me is career planning, because what we're finding is if you've got Agile coaches, and we've got product owners, and most of the Agile teams are saying, we don't need middle management. Actually, I'm worried about where does the average project manager see his next career step, and how do we get those guys linked in, and what do they do, and how do they move on? The danger is that we will lose those trained and capable resources to the business as a whole. Last thing, how do we go about doing this? I think an 8-step, we've looked at an 8-step implementation process, which basically follows a structured methodology. I can't remember which one it was. No, we found this from, oh, I know. This is actually, the methodology is actually from the UK government's, what they call GSD, which is digital methodology for delivering digital governance services. And we found this methodology there, and it's just great for implementing this type of process. You know, we're testing and learning, and we're revising, and we're doing iterations. So what we're saying is this implementation is not a one-shot. It's actually a process of improvement. And if any of you have looked at the PMO value chain from Americo Pinto, you'll find that there's the same type of concept behind that. Last thing I'd like to say is it's a cultural change, and making cultural change is a non-trivial task. But we've used a 4-change model of communications: explain, excite, enable, embed. The enable piece is providing the training and coaching to those impacted. Embed is actually measuring how well you've done. So I'll throw this at this point. I think I've got to, yes, I've got to the end. Bill, over to you. And if there's questions that people would like, happy to do that. Do I press the stop sharing button?
No, just leave it right there like that. And definitely questions. And first of all, thank you very much, Jon. There's a lot of great information there. I want to start off with the first question, and people will, you guys can ask your questions through the chat box. So just start typing your questions in the chat box, and Jon should be able to see it. If not, Jon, I can read it out. So yeah, just leave that the way it is. That's perfect. Jon, first question though. Yeah, we can still see your screen, Jon. So just leave it the way it was for a sec. We can see your windows. Yeah, perfect. Jon, first question. Do you have a template, or do you have a download on that risk burn down that you were talking about? That sounds like a really interesting dashboard.
Oh, okay. This is all part of your book, Bill.
It's in
communication tools. Okay, yeah, I can.
You were talking about a specific one though, and I thought there was maybe an Agile one. I'll look at my own book. I thought you had a specific one.
No, I've got a specific one, and we produced a specific one. And yes, I can let people have it.
Okay, and then the other question was, people were asking is, can we give them access to this PDF file?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and so I'll handle that. So Jon will send it to me, and then I'll coordinate it getting out to folks who have joined. Other questions? Again, just type them in the chat, and I can. If Jon can't see it, no problem. I can just read them out.
I can't see it at all, Bill.
Okay, no problem. I can read them out. It's better just to leave the screen the way it is there. Okay, nothing. Jose, Neil, anything? Francisco? There's a ton of people on, so.
How many people on, Bill?
Quite a few, actually. Yeah, we'll definitely. I'm surprised we had a huge list of folks joining us today, so that's awesome. But let me just wrap it up then. If there's no questions,
I'm happy to take questions, Bill, at any time. If people want to get in contact with Rick, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to provide data. I'm happy to have conference calls or Skype calls, whatever.
Okay. Well, so we've given enough time. You've got your presentation or your email up there in your mobile. So I think we'll leave it at that. There's no questions that are coming in via the chat box. And so again, Jon, thank you very much. I will coordinate getting the slides out to folks or the PDF file out to folks. But I can't thank you enough for your presentation today. And thank you all for joining, everyone. So I appreciate that, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.